Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Turning Point podcast. It's a podcast about stories and strategies from the world of business. And I'm Blaine Birch, CEO of Dryrun, and I'm the host of the podcast. And today, joining me is Josh Patrick. I've known Josh for a while. He's got a long and storied career, especially helping other businesses excel while he started his own businesses himself. So we're happy to have you here, Josh. It's really always been great chatting with you, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I appreciate being here.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit, Josh, about your long and storied career and what you're doing today, and then a little bit about kind of your where you came from.
Okay, you mean my checkered career?
Checkered career. That's the entrepreneur career.
Yeah. Well, it's a career of fits and starts, which I think is true with so many people who are private business owners. Is that you take 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 4 steps backwards. And the 4 steps backwards, although they're really painful, are probably the best learning lessons you're ever going to have while you run a business. So,
Absolutely. It's. I always find the exact same thing. You trip, you skin your knee, and at the end of the day, you're just like, why am I doing this? And then the next day, you're like, that was a fundamental shift. That helped us get that direction. So it's a faster way to learn.
yeah, I mean, the truth is most people go into businesses don't have formal business training. And if they did, I think the failure rate would even be higher.
You're right. There isn't the
You know,
willingness to learn.
well, we've had a few MBAs working for us over the years, and every single time I've had to retrain them into thinking about how a smaller private business works. And what I learned over the years is MBAs are taught that businesses have unlimited resources because they're trained for the Fortune 1000, where cash is not an issue. But when
Yeah.
you're working in a privately held business, it's all about cash. It's not about profit. And actually, I
Yeah.
have a good story there. If you'd like, is that early in business, I was 24 years old, and I had the opportunity to buy a very, very, very small operation for my father in the food service and vending company, just $75,000 a year. And we immediately got really lucky in the first 3 years and grew it to $1.5 million.
Oh, wow. Terrific. Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing to happen if you're not 24 years old. Because when you're 24 years old and that happens, you think it's all because of your wonderful and absolute brilliant skill that you have for running a business. In truth, it was just plain dumb, blind luck. But unfortunately, just plain dumb, blind luck, the other side shows up eventually and rears its ugly head. And in this case, it was I didn't know how to read a cash flow statement. In fact, I
Okay.
didn't even know what a cash flow statement was. And I didn't even really understand the concept of cash. I thought that number at the bottom of your profit and loss statement was the money that you had to spend. Well, I don't know if you know anything about the vending business, but vending machines are expensive.
Okay.
Back then, it was, this was in 1976, and vending machines were like $1,800 a piece. Now they're probably
Oh,
$5,000,
wow.
$6,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So we were selling candy bars for 30 cents. So you sell a lot of candy bars to pay for an $1,800 machine.
Yeah.
And the truth was, we were growing so fast and buying so much equipment. And I didn't realize that the equipment that you buy for a vending location isn't expensed, it's depreciated. So let's say I spend $1 million in vending machines. I don't have $1 million cost on my P&L. I have a $200,000 cost on my P&L. Or back then it was actually around $140,000 cost because we had eight-year depreciation.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
instead of having that, I was laying out $100,000. I had $140,000 cost on my profit and loss statement. I didn't realize that there was an $860,000 difference between what we outlaid and what our cost was. And I also had a controller at that point who was embezzling.
Oh, no.
And
Yeah.
he was hiding the bills in his drawer. So I didn't know that we had all these overdue bills. And then one day the phone rang, one of our major suppliers said, hey, you're 90 days overdue. When are we going to get paid? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, you haven't paid us for 90 days. When do you plan to give us some money? And that was not true with
Yeah.
just that one supplier. It was basically true with all our suppliers. So here I am, facing the wall of not having enough cash to pay our vendors, and I tapped out all our bank lines. There was no place for me to go for money.
Yeah.
So I sort of had this really horrible experience about 6 years into running my business, thinking things were just grand, and they weren't so grand after all, as it turns out. And I got lucky. Again, I got lucky a lot in running business in that when you're up against the wall, you don't know this. I didn't realize this. Is that there was a school of, how you get management consultants called turnaround specialists. Well, I didn't know a turnaround specialist existed, so I ended up being my own turnaround specialist. And I
Yeah.
went to these vendors and I said, well, here's your choice. We can take these accounts payable they have with you and spread it out over 3 years. And I'll pay you, a fair interest rate for that and pay you COD on stuff coming in the door, or you can go bankrupt and you get 5 cents on the dollar. And
Easy choice there.
well, it wasn't so much of an easy choice for them. They actually all did go along with my plan for
Okay.
having them become my extra banks.
Yeah.
But what I learned in that experience, which was not the greatest experience of all times, what I experienced is there really is no such thing as a rule. What you think are rules probably are negotiations if you have to do it. But
Yeah.
you don't want to go to your supplier and say, oh, by the way, I'm just not going to pay you. And you're going to
Yeah.
term it out if there isn't a really good reason behind it, because they're likely to say, screw you.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
it's interesting because it was one of the things that I learned, that one of the earliest lessons I had in business was that I had to learn how to negotiate. I figured it out right away, and I bought 2 books immediately. I remember that day I went out and bought the What They Don't Teach You in Harvard Business School about negotiation, and then
yep.
the Harvard Business School book on negotiation. I thought there's got to be 2 things here, and that has stuck with me. They're on my bookshelf right behind me here, and that's exactly it. When you're in business and your back's against the wall, I remember some of the deals we came up with in 2009 after we expanded so fast to survive and negotiate our way out of into a lease payment that made sense. And yeah, it's just one of the skills you have to have, and that's when you're forced to do it. You got no other option.
Yeah. Well, we're in that sort of world again right now.
Yeah.
And there's an awful lot of businesses that are going to disappear that probably don't have to disappear, but will disappear because the owner, for whatever reason, doesn't want to take the steps that will keep them in business.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
And
so yeah.
they believe it's better for them to close the doors and walk away, which, yeah, might be okay, but frankly, there's usually a way around that.
Yeah, there's and it's just the how much risk they're willing to take, and at what point in their life they are. We're seeing, I think, more businesses up here in Canada closing and looking at closing that they might be able to survive, but there's a lot of businesses that are that we're talking with that are they're the owners are getting into that close to retirement age, and they have to take on a big risk, and they have to take on personal guarantees. And this is one of the things happening in Canada is a lot of the loans you have to put on personal guarantees.
I mean, in the US, I think, and this is forever, and probably 99% of the loans done for small business in the US are personally guaranteed.
Yeah, yeah, and
And by
it
the way,
makes it difficult. Yeah,
the definition of small business in the US is anything under $100 million in sales. My
yeah,
definition of a small business in the US is anything under $1 million in sales. And I would
yeah,
say 100% of those business owners are personally guaranteeing their loans. No bank is
absolutely.
going
Yeah,
to loan them on the balance sheet.
yeah, and it's the same. It's the same in Canada. You have to be have a pretty good track, well, a really good track record, and been around a while. A lot of documentation, profitable to get, and then you still have to push a lot to get it, and it makes it tricky. So it's the current time is tough for everybody, and I think we're going to see. My expectation that a lot of the business closures will be in Q4 of this year, Q1 of next year. I don't think we've even seen a lot of it right now. It's there's
Oh,
the first
yeah.
little wave. Yeah.
In the US, we're going to hit the wall this Saturday because
That's not good. Yeah.
we have August 1st coming around,
Okay.
and the loan programs that the government has put together are pretty much done with, and they're thinking about another one, but frankly, you're just extending the pain. It's not going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
A restaurant can't work at 50% capacity.
No, no, that's, I saw a stat yesterday. I actually have to look it up because I want to make sure I actually have it right, but it was from the Canadian um, Federation of Independent Business, I believe. And if I read it right, it was half the companies have half the revenue or less already. So you're looking at, how do companies keep operations going on half their revenue or less, and even cutting some costs back. You're never going to cut 55% back to try and break even. It's looking like it could be Death Valley coming up here for a lot for industry in Canada and really across the world. So it's a really volatile and unstable time. I think
It's
that
almost,
the hard parts are ahead of us, unfortunately.
it's almost like we have two economies going. Is I think for the most part, the public companies are going to do fine.
Yeah.
They're well capitalized. They have plenty of cash, and they have access to cash if they need it. And the Fed has put away, was it $4.5 trillion for them?
Yeah.
But 50% of the United States is small business,
Yeah. Yeah.
and at least 50%. Well, I won't say that many. I'm going to say at least 25% of the businesses, small business in the United States, businesses doing less than $10 million, will be gone by the second quarter next year.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we're going to see the same thing up here, unfortunately.
Now,
And
there's another side to that, though, Blaine. The other side is there are some businesses who are doing incredibly well and have done what they should have done for putting together emergency funds and lines of credit, and they're still making money. In fact, some are making a lot of money. And
yeah,
for those businesses, there has never been a better time in the mergers and acquisition world. Because, the
yes,
companies like, Google and, Procter and Gamble and the big, companies, they're not interested in buying you unless you're doing 30, $40 million in sales.
yeah,
But if you have a business doing 25, $30 million in sales, you can pick off these $1 million, $2 million businesses like popcorn if you spend some time really thinking about it and you buy them for distressed asset value.
yeah, yeah. That does make it's going to be a very different landscape in a lot of ways that we're kind of going to be left with, and it's and it's sort of, in a way, it's such a dark time too. It's hard to not focus on the negatives, but I think there are companies that are going to excel coming out of this. I think there's a lot of companies going to grow. The way people do business, the way they operate is changing rapidly. I know there's a stampede to the cloud for a lot of businesses that aren't really taking advantage of the cloud because, like it or not, they have a dispersed workforce. That brings efficiencies, that brings savings, that brings a lot of opportunity too. So it'll be really interesting sitting back and seeing, how this plays out over the next 6 months or a year. And I'm hoping. We love small business. That's what we're all about. So I know the public companies are going to excel, and that's less our sweet spot. So we're really pulling for small business and those independent businesses because those are people at the helm there, and it's their fortunes at risk right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is those people that are at the helm, and I'm glad that you guys are servicing that group of people.
It's every day. It's what we're made to do. So it's but and this cash flow, like that's what we deal with. For those of you who don't know, that's what our company is a cash flow management tool, and that's where we play, and it's always been critical, but now it's never more critical. The volatility is so high, and the margins are so tight, and so it's where we're meant to be. So, but I
Well,
wanted to circle back a little bit
I,
more, Josh. Sorry,
go ahead.
well, I just
I was just, go ahead.
You want to say something? Let's just dive in. What is it?
Well, I just wanted to say that I just want to give your company a plug because the thing that lesson from the story I just told you about my cash is that small businesses run on cash. They don't run on profits. In fact, if I talk to a successful small business person, what do they do every November and December? They try to kill all the profit they have in their company, but they don't try to kill all the cash they have in the company because they're trying to lower the tax bill. Now, sometimes they do really stupid things to do that, But they're still, their goal is to have zero profit and 8 tons of cash. So what that teaches you is that a business runs on cash. They don't run on profit. Profit, if you don't have profits over a long period of time, you won't have any cash either. But the
Yeah.
truth is, it's more important to measure your cash than it is to measure your profit. My father used to do this thing. He used to call it checkbook accounting. You may have heard of this. Checkbook accounting is very simple. And
Yeah.
for a lot of businesses, it works relatively well. Is my checking account growing or is my checking account shrinking? If it's growing, life is good. If it's shrinking, I probably have a problem. And he ran a business for 30 years that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we always talk about profit versus cash as you know, you run out of cash, you get hit by a bus. If you're not profitable, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's a long process,
Right.
but you have time to adjust on the profit side. The cash side, you can run out of cash and you're just done tomorrow. You're just
Yep. Absolutely.
and like, you know, I was on a podcast the other day with one of our national banks here in Canada, and one of the things we were talking about, I kind of used that bus example, and someone in the webinar, sorry, not a podcast, a webinar, had asked why they should focus on or actually do projections rather than just basically like a daily cash in and out. And my answer was, if you step off the curb in front of a bus, it makes a difference if the bus is about to hit you or if it's a block away. I said, if you buy yourself time, you have options. Now you can go and talk with your bank, and you can talk with investors. You can make moves if you have time, and that's what those projections buy you, is time and options. If you run out of cash, you're out of cash, and the bank's not likely to come to the rescue if you say, I'm out of cash and can't make payroll tomorrow. So it's very true. You have to be a pretty substantial business before you're not paying quite as much attention to cash, I suppose. So
Yeah.
but anyway, thanks for bringing that up, because you know, it's I always appreciate someone talking about what we're doing over here. But I did want to circle back, because I you know, when I look at your track record, you've done so many different things. You got so many different projects going, all of them to help businesses grow and thrive, and you've got a very long and storied career. And so I wanted to sort of focus in on what else have you found in your career that is a fundamental factor in helping a business sort of excel, gain traction, grow, something that has really been helpful to you?
Probably, and this was true with me, and it's also been true for my clients over the years. The hardest skill and the most important skill that a private business owner can ever learn is how to effectively delegate. And the reason you need to learn to effectively delegate is you want to become operationally irrelevant in your business. To build real value in the business, you have to not be in the day-to-day operations of your business. Whoever the successor owner of the company is, they're going to want your systems, they're going to want your people, they're going to want your cash flow, they're going to want your recurring revenue. They're not going to want you. And it's a hard lesson to learn,
Yeah.
and it's the great lie of M&A. You know, if a private equity company comes up to your door and they say, Blaine, I want to buy you, they're going to say something like, you know, Blaine, we love your business, we love your cash flow, but we like you more than both. And if you're not part of the deal, we're not interested. That's called the great lie of M&A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the truth is, they know you're probably going to get fired in the first year or two. They
Yep.
may give you a
Yeah.
5-year contract, but they have no intention of having you be around for 5 years, because if they've been buying businesses over the years, they know that owners are not able to work under a system. They're all like, it's like herding cats.
Very true. Yeah.
And they know that all the other people in the company probably do, because the business has systems, and those people have been working with systems, but the owner keeps ignoring them and saying, no, those systems are for you, not for me, which
Yeah.
is a bad idea, by the way, but it's true. So
It's true. Yeah.
if you become operationally irrelevant, it's the thing that allows you to do that. The other issue is, if you're not operationally irrelevant and you're not a great delegator, all you're going to do is you're going to have a business with you and a bunch of helpers. And you can only grow your business to maybe 18 to 25 people. And that's a real stretch of 25. And 18 might even be a stretch of how many people you can have working in your company. When we grew from 1.5 to 25 and then to 30, when we opened the second branch up our 4th year in business, I hit a crisis. It was a real crisis. In fact,
Mhm.
I was the worst manager of all times. I would get up in the morning and walk in our office and absolutely have a full-throated scream at somebody who had made a mistake. And the problem was I was never taking responsibility for anything that went wrong in our company. It was always someone else's fault. So I'd either blame another person or justify my bad behavior for why things went wrong. Well, I took one of those new age seminars in the early 80s, the ones you stay up all night and, did that. And
Yeah.
part of that was there was a poster which got me, which was the teacher had written responsibility with a line and lay blame and justify below it. So you either had above the line or below the line behavior.
Yeah.
So after that seminar, I had to get up and look in the mirror and say, guess what? I'm the problem. I'm the one that's causing these things. So I went in and I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do from now on. And everyone said, yeah, right. Nobody believed a word I said because nobody ever listens to what you say. They watch what you do. But
Yeah.
over the course of the next few years, they saw that I actually stopped blaming and justifying. I would still lose my temper occasionally, not at people, but about situations. That was a big thing. But I've almost learned to control that. And I'm 67 now, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
yeah.
but the truth is that is the key skill you need as a business person. Everything else is just stuff. But if you can't do that and get out of the way of your business and put systems in that support your people and learn how to delegate, which means you need to learn how to inspect the work that's being done properly, you're
Yeah.
never going to grow your business.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like I've felt that myself. Going, you dive into business. Same thing. I didn't have a business background. I dove in because I was a domain expert, and then now suddenly you're also responsible, and you're hiring people, and you're growing, learning on the fly. And as a transition, and you have to make that mental transition from like I was when I started. Like my background's in design. I have a master's in design. That was where we were at, and there's a shift in your mind where I'm not a designer. I'm a business owner. And now it's like now I'm not. I'm a CEO, and I have to be able to operate that way, or we're not going to go anywhere. And there's a lot of hard learnings because there isn't. We're not going to school for this. So I'm learning on the fly. And but it's interesting because you talk about the M&A, like they want to get the business owner out. And it's funny because when I talk with friends of mine that have sold and that are in, looking at selling, and that it's so funny because the entrepreneurs tend to be like, you're going to want out in a year. You don't want to be, they want to leave. So this is funny because they want to leave as bad as the business wants them out. It's like, but they need them around just long enough to get that transfer of that knowledge transfer. And then it's probably quite a good split to just get them out either way because they're just not built for
Well,
that.
you
So
do have to figure out what's next in your life. Otherwise, you're going to be very, very, very lonely and you're going to have a really bad case of seller's remorse.
yeah, yeah,
That's a big deal. I've actually, I've been thinking a lot. I work a lot in transitions. I think transitions are incredibly difficult to do well. And there's a piece in transitions that nobody talks about, and that's loneliness. Is that
yeah,
when you sell your business, the phone stops ringing. All those social interactions that you've had will magically disappear. And it's not because you're a bad person, it's because you go off the radar screen. And that's true in life. So if you haven't replaced before you sell your business what you're going to do next, you're going to have a couple of years of really hard transition ahead of you. You're going to go through the transition. And the
yeah,
transition is going to be painful either way you do it, but it's how much pain do you want to have? So you really, 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 really need to be focusing on, and this is another reason to be operationally irrelevant, by the way. If you're tactically involved in your business, you have no time to figure out what's next. But if you're
yeah,
operationally irrelevant and you're not working the day-to-day of your company, you have time to get out and experiment with other things you can do in your life. And you
yeah,
might find there are some other things you're interested in, besides golf, by the way, because you can't play golf 7 days a week, although some people do. But you're going to find stuff that says, gee, I want to keep my brain involved. I want to keep my mind involved. What can I do that's going to do that for me? Some
Yeah.
people go back to school and do a new career. Other people do things like become part of, some sort of a support organization in their communities. But there's tons and tons of ways you can do this, but you have to spend some time mindfully and strategically doing it, because if you don't, you're going to have some real personal pain.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting, because I hadn't considered that. And honestly, a little bit of the role of how, I started Dryrun. After I sold my last company, I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but it was, that was one of the things, as soon as you said it, I distinctly remember, you're like, your staff's gone, your team's gone, your clients are gone. But it is that the phone is no longer ringing. The email, they're just, the strange is like, I don't want a ton of, I got way too much email coming in every spot. While we're talking, my emails, goes completely radio silent for a long time. And yeah, and it's a difficult transition. And I think that part of it was me probably sort of treading water and figuring out what I wanted to do, and having to go out and talk with people, because I couldn't, you had to do something. And those conversations where a lot of it was around cash flow, and ended up going into Dryrun. But it's interesting, because I hadn't thought about that. It's a lonely time. It's a very strange time right after. And I wasn't at the point where you're selling a huge operation either. So it's probably the magnitude harder as you sell a longer served operation too.
Well, it was really interesting is that when I sold my first business, I was 44 years old. And I wasn't one of those people who stuck around. I sold my business. In 45 minutes, I walked out of the building that we had later. I never walked back. Now, they didn't need me because we had a really good management team, and we had a thing called a stay bonus, which helped keep our people involved and stay there. And they got a big bonus if they did it. And we were very, very well systematized. So it was a clean operation to take over. So they didn't need me. And I said, you don't want me. I don't want you. We decided to tell the truth for a change. And I walked out, and I ended up going to work for a international life insurance company, selling life insurance. And 2 months later, I went to their first, regional meeting, and it was it was one of the worst 3 days I ever spent in my life. And the reason was, I had just left 2 months before that. Before I sold the business, I went to my last vending show. And I had taught hundreds of other vending operators, either people management or financial management, over the years. So I was incredibly well known. I don't know if I was popular, but people wanted to talk to me all the time. And then I go from there to this insurance meeting where nobody knew me, nobody wanted to talk to me, nobody cared who I was. And I was sitting there feeling really sorry for myself. Now, I got over that pretty quickly. But the truth was, it's a very lonely time in those first few months after you sell your business. And I had something to go to. I just hadn't moved far enough into that for it to take up the social loneliness I felt. And I didn't really realize that until just recently, by the way, from leaving my vending company. So it's a tough thing.
It is. It's you're walking away from a baby. It's not the same as leaving a job. Leaving a job is never the same as leaving
well,
something you built, right?
leaving a job has the same thing. If you're retiring from a company you worked for 10 years or 20 years or 5 years, you're leaving all your friends and social relationships and all that stuff behind. And if you haven't done something to replace that, you're going to go through an adjustment period that's going to be really tough.
Yeah.
We call that passage. There's 4 stages of transition. You have anticipation, where you're anticipating something is going to happen. You have the ending, where it actually does happen. In my case, it was signing the papers to sell my business. Then you go through passage, which is a really upsetting time in your life, because it's like you're going off in 18 different directions at one time. So you really need to focus on 1 or 2 or 3 things you want to accomplish, and let everything else sit on the back burner. And then finally, after you go through passage for a period of time, sometimes it's 6 months, for a loss of a spouse is as much as 7 or 8 or 9 years, you get to what's called the new normal, where things are different. We're in the middle of that right now with the coronavirus, is
Yeah,
that we're not in ending. I mean, we're not in passage. We're in ending. We
yeah,
don't know what passage looks like because we haven't ended the virus yet. Until the
yeah,
virus is pretty much ended, we're just stuck as a society.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's we don't know. Like I just have visions of after we finally got sort of over the hump, and then things are actually sort of opening up, and those some of those fears are gone, of driving down the street and seeing, okay, who survived, what is open and what is closed, and because even now I go down the street and you do see places closed now. You see a lot of them are open, but I know there's a lot on life support, and it's going to be a different world, and I hope we get to that passage point soon. It's every minute longer is a minute more difficult for a lot of businesses. So
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be till second quarter next year at the earliest,
that would be
unfortunately.
my, yeah, I would say the same. I think it's still got a good at least 6 to 8 months before we have some real fundamental changes. We got to figure out how to work our way through that. So
Yeah.
but this was awesome, Josh. You've some really great insights there. I always love talking with entrepreneurs. We were talking about this before we kind of went on to the show here, that everywhere I go, it's always been like this. But I walk into almost any store now. How are you guys doing? How are you guys doing? Entrepreneurs can tell when it's another entrepreneur, and they'll just open up. And it's always so interesting. And right now it's sometimes it's a little heartbreaking, but there's also a lot of success stories that we're hearing that help lift us up a little bit too. And before we kind of wrap this up, Josh, I know we've been on for a little while here. I just want to get a bit of an update on what your key things are today. Like, I know you've written a book. I have it on my shelf. I've just been through it. You've been on your podcast. This way, I got a so cool mic. I need a good mic here for us. Give me an idea of kind of an update for everybody. What are you working on today?
Well, I just finished my second book, which
Second
is
book,
called
okay.
which is called The Sale Ready Company, which is actually a continuation of the first book, where we take the same characters and we're getting him ready to transition his business to his family. And
Okay.
we have some real challenges along the way. And if you've read my first book, you can guess what one of those challenges are, which is his son.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had a really good time writing this book. My wife, who is an incredible critic of my writing, actually likes this one.
Okay.
I'm not sure she was wild about my first book, and but this one I think is a really good book, and I'm really actually very excited about it. It actually fits in with a whole host of products we're putting together, which is called the Sale Ready Company. And the sale ready company is not that you're going to sell your company, but you always want your company ready for sale, because it's more valuable to you and it's more valuable to the next owner also at the same time.
Yeah.
And if you have a sale ready company, you're going to have more fun and make more money than you ever thought possible. And,
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
so the book will be out probably in November is my hope.
Okay.
We have a product called the Sale Ready Company, where we help you figure out, we look at the 8 steps to get a sale ready company. We help you examine them. And we say, gee, is that something you want to do or not do? And if you're interested in getting a free infographic on what we have, if you go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/sale ready, you'll get that infographic. And it's about .co, not .com. I wasn't making a mistake.
Okay. They're tricky to get, those .coms.
Well, actually,
Yeah. No.
I
Absolutely.
have salereadycompany.com, which is going to be our new home for all stuff sale ready.
Okay.
But
So by
it's not ready. It's not ready. It's not even. It's just we bought the URL. It's all we've done.
Okay, great. So so your books come out November. No, I want to mention November 2020, because I don't know when you'll exactly be listening to this podcast. Right now, we're in right at the end of July 2020. So if you are listening to it a little bit later, sustainablebusiness.co slash
Yeah.
sell ready.
So we'll give you the infographic.
Give you the
And if you're
infographic.
listening to this in the fall, salereadycompany.com will be up
Sell
and
ready
running.
company. Okay, sellreadycompany.com. So there's probably could be up and running for you guys by the time you see this. So,
Yes.
that's terrific. I'm looking forward to reading that book as well. And it was great chatting with you, Josh. Great insight. I love talking with business owners that have you know, been around a long time, and like you said, sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. You know, it's there's a lot of learnings in those tough times. So I appreciate your insight. Loved having you on the show, and I'll definitely be banging on your door to bring you back for an update at some point as well.
I'd love to do it. Thanks, Blaine.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And please look us up at, you can actually find us at turningpointshow.com. That's where you can, quick address to find out all of our shows and where we're at. And hopefully you enjoyed the show and will join us again. Thanks all.